Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. In 1970, Free pushed the boundaries of rock by incorporating vast amounts of groove and soul into their breakthrough album Fire and Water. Departing from the heavy use of modern technology in favour of a raw album and focusing on tight musicianship as opposed to virtuoso passages, Fire and Water would become Free's breakthrough album whilst also boasting one of the most famous rock songs of all time, All Right Now. Joining me to discuss this album is my co-host, Mr. Felipe Amorim. How you doing, man?
Doing great, man, and you?
Good. Yeah, very well. Thank you very well. It's getting, I've had to put my light on today because it's getting so dark nowadays, isn't it?
It's dark, man. It's been dark since early afternoon, isn't it?
It's 4 o'clock now in the UK, and it's almost dark. Like, I know it's crazy because this happens every year, yet it still surprises me. I'm still there.
You guys are still shocked when it snows, when it rains, when it gets too hot, when it gets too cold.
And you're the Brazilian in the UK, and you're like, this is fine. And I'm there as
it's been like this for the last 10 years for me.
And I'm there as the Brit, 30 years into my British life, like, what? It's too dark. It's too dark. But yeah,
you've got to moan about something. Isn't it?
That's exactly. That's it. British culture. You have to know.
The culture. Yeah.
Anyway, as I said in the introduction, today we are doing Free's Fire and Water album, which I'm actually really excited to do because guess what, bro? I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. Amazing album. Amazing album. As usual, I'll start off with some of the little details. So the album was released on the 26th of June 1970, recorded between January and June of the same year at the Trident and Island Studios in London. The genre could be considered hard rock, blues rock. We'll discuss this a bit later. It's just over 35 minutes long, released on the Island label, and the producers was the whole band. So there we go. Why don't you give us a bit of background information about it?
Well, the thing with Free is they were like a proper rock band. They were playing small clubs, and kind of getting tighter and tighter, and becoming like recognized by their live performances. So that's, I think, how a rock band should start. You write your songs and then you go perform them live, and then you go and put them in the album. The other way around. And I think they were doing this for a couple of years. They were really young. That's the other thing. I think Paul Rodgers was 21 by the time they recorded this album, which is their third album, by the way. So,
and when the band started in 68, Andy Fraser was 16. So he'd have been 18 or 19 when this one came out.
Exactly. So yeah, it's like he was really, really young and a great musician. The thing with them is their personalities were quite different. I think Paul Rodgers or it was Andy Fraser, one of them said that they were like Andy Fraser and Paul Rodgers. They were Fire and Water. So that's I don't know if the name of the album comes exclusively from this, but they said they were the two songwriters really, and based on their personalities, I think it was Andy Fraser who said I was water and Paul Rodgers was fire. So that was it.
Did they ever clash, or was it just that they were different?
Apparently, they never clashed when it came to play music. They had their personal conflicts and stuff, but none of that happened when they were playing music. They were really happy with everything that they produced together. Paul Rodgers describes the time when he met Paul Kossoff, the guitar player, as a life-changing experience. He said we shared the deep love of the blues, and we were listening to the same records even before we met. So they were into the same those two were into the same kind of music, like American blues and so. And one of the albums that Paul Rodgers mentions is Born Under a Bad Sign by Albert King. If you guys listen to this album, it does have a lot to do with what Free was playing at the time.
1 second, just pause when I say, for any new listeners and viewers, you will find a dedicated playlist for the episode down in the show notes, which is a playlist full of all the songs from this album and any other songs we mention. So shall I put in Born Under a Bad Sign, the title track, yeah?
Yes, the title track is a great
That's an amazing
reference.
Album.
Yeah, if you guys have the time to listen to the whole album, we should go over that album one day. It's a really good album.
For sure. By the Albert King version. Yeah.
Albert King version, cool.
That's him.
So amongst other influences, they were listening to The Band, which we both love, right? Yeah. The Band is great. Loads of Motown artists, Otis Redding. So they were into American soul music. Paul Rodgers said they were into American black music. So basically soul, blues, Motown, R&B, that kind of stuff, which is... Having that as the main influence is unusual for a rock band, I think.
Especially considering that sort of rock. I'm generalizing here, but rock generally came from the blues.
Yeah.
So to have
but the soul and Motown and other stuff like above,
Yeah,
even for me, is above the blues in their
I
sound.
just find that the blues, it branched off, and in one way you had sort of country come out of blues, another way you had R&B and soul, the other way you had rock. It's very, like you said, it's very unusual to hear such a, especially in the 70s, for such an established and known rock band who played rock music to delve so much into a soulful aspect of it. And this has been my favourite part of it, man. I mean, do you want to talk more background, or
Yeah,
just tell me when you want to go
just
through?
one more thing, because apparently they were like gigging together consistently for it says 18 months on my notes here. I found this information somewhere. It was probably for a bit longer than that. Around 2 years, I would say. They were playing together and writing stuff together. They used to get together on Mondays to go to Andy Fraser's mum's house to listen to records together. That's such a cool experience that most people don't do nowadays anymore. Let's listen to this. I found this album, it's really great. Let's listen to it. So they were writing stuff based on music they were sharing with each other. And
That's such a lovely moment,
yeah.
because I remember I had an experience with my best friend where a metal band we liked back in the day, a band called Bullet for My Valentine, they had a new album come out. And I remember what year would that have been? About 2008. So I remember that getting home that day, and we both got to mine, and we just opened the Amazon package, and the album was there. We put it in the CD player. We just listened to it 3 times. So
CD player.
But I know, can you imagine? But do you know what? I'm so glad that I was able to experience that, because I was born in 1995. So I just, in terms of when I came to start appreciating music, I just missed the
vinyl. I got the end of the vinyl era. I got the end of it.
You did, but I still got physical music. I was still able to wait for a CD, put it in the thing. So I'm so glad that moment happened, because it does mean a lot, especially when you look back at an album, even if you don't like the album now compared to when you listen to it, just having that moment with your mate and just listening to a song for the first time that none of you's heard on YouTube or Spotify, just originally, organically, is such a lovely moment.
Yeah, I had a friend in school. We used to go to his place after school and put his dad's CDs on the CD player and listen to the 70s rock stuff. So imagine the guys from Free doing that, at home, listening to albums together and talking about, we should write a riff like that, or lyrics based on that sort of feeling. And the one last thing I want to say about this background before they recorded the album is that they were into recording albums. They didn't care about singles. That is, I think, an important piece of information. They were not focused on singles. They didn't want to have a hit song. They wanted a hit album. The whole thing about this album, I think, is that it came from that necessity of writing an epic album. Nothing to do with having a #1 single. In this case, they got a #2 single, isn't it? In the UK, at least. Yeah,
it may as well be a #1 though. Everyone knows
it could have been a #1. Yeah.
Cool. Recording process. Did you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, do you? If you know anything about it.
Oh no, I don't. I thought you said you were sort of recording.
What I said, what I know about about the recordings, they didn't do too many sessions, right?
Okay.
It wasn't that kind of there's overdubs in it, of course, but you can hear again, you can hear a lot of echo, a lot of the sound of the room.
Yeah.
I don't know which album we're talking about. I think it was Cream that we're talking about, that you have that sort of it's just the band and the room. It's almost like the room is another member of the band. And the guitar player actually said that they felt every time they were playing together, they felt like there was a 5th member of the band there, like an entity that was like keeping them together. Like there's a feeling of something like a, like a 5th member was there guiding them through the whole thing. So I think the album was done in a very organic way. One thing about the production is they didn't want the producer who did the previous album. They said it sounded too clean. So they didn't like it. They wanted to be a bit more raw. They wanted to be more like a rock band. It's funny because the compositions are not that, typical rock music, but they wanted the sound of the album to be rock music. So my general feeling about that is that they really focused on doing something that could have been performed live. Yeah. Because you don't hear much overdubs. Sometimes they've got 2 guitars, but most of the time you can hear one guitar, maybe have layers of the same guitar, but you have one guitar line, main melody going on, and one bass and drums and vocals. You don't there's not too many like backing vocals or anything fancy in terms of production. It sounds like a band rehearsing or playing live. That's how I feel about it. The other thing is I think the fact that they could play, Andy Fraser could play the piano really well as well is something that helped with the album, because he doesn't play only bass on the album. So they didn't hire anyone from outside the band to play in the album.
I think when you hear it, when you hear the album, it is so obvious that, like the band, there is just such a cohesion in the music between the members, even like the relationship between Paul Rodgers' voice and Paul Koskov's guitar. Did I get his surname right? It is.
I think it's Kosov.
Kosov, not Koskov. Kosov, yeah. The band sound like they're just on fire. The whole album. It doesn't sound like there's one moment. Well, maybe one, and I'll get there later. But with respect to that, there's three things I want to talk about in terms of the music of the album: groove, soul, and space. And I'll start with the easy one, space. The amount of space there is on the album, and for listeners and viewers who have been listening, was this episode 89 now? If for most of you who've been listening for like the past 89 episodes, you'll know my favourite quote in music, in terms of playing music, is, "It's not the notes you play, it's the space you leave." That's what makes a song. And the album is littered with space. There are so many moments where one member of the band is not doing anything. And I don't mean the singer, because that's obvious, during a solo he wouldn't sing. But so many moments where Andy Fraser could overplay or could play more notes than he's choosing to play. Just look at Mr. Big, like that unusual bass part at the end. Well, which unusual for the time.
Very. I think still like I was shocked when you first heard it. Where are you going now? Like I was almost someone said, "Andy, come back. Where are you going now?"
like a fishing role. Bring him in, reel him in.
It goes too far from whatever concept has been going on there, and it's just brilliant.
Yeah, but I think then there's other moments where he just holds a note.
Yeah,
and it's perfect. But all of them do it, man. All of them do it. All of them have that moment. And I think with that space, the relationship between the rhythm section is unbelievable. Just constantly playing off of each other. Yeah. And you and me know from being a bass player and a drummer that what we did in this scenario is we always made sure that, right, if Felipe's playing a really busy part here, I'm not going to crowd this with notes. It's going to be too much. It's going to clash. Yeah. And you always said, okay, I know that Laz is playing a busy bass line here, so I'm going to just bring it back.
Yeah.
This is just rhythm section 101. Rhythm section perfection. How about that?
Yeah. It is. There's some points where I think it's heavy load at the beginning. There's a drum roll, like a build up, like drum roll. And it's almost like the whole band stops. They don't stop, but they leave so much space for that drum roll to stand out. And I think it's the same for every instrument and in every song. There's always space. You can hear the details because it's like they are listening to each other really well.
And they all know what the song needs, but we'll come back to that when we talk about the band members.
Yeah, I want to ask you one thing.
Sure.
What do you think about the vocal mix in this album? I felt like the vocals are buried in the mix. Didn't you feel like that?
See, yes, I did. But I don't have an issue with that. I am a believer of, if you're talking pop music, I get it. The vocals have to be far and beyond above the rest of the mix, because normally the pop star is the voice. With rock music, I'm happy for it to be like that, because I don't believe anyone is more important than another in a typical rock setting. What are we talking about rock music? Heavy guitar, thumping bass, good old slamming drums, and a great vocalist. I don't believe that one should be above the other. So I actually enjoyed that it felt like it didn't feel like Paul Rodgers was being held on a pedestal here. And like, okay, all right, hold on. Yeah, let's turn our instruments down so you can have the verse.
Well, if you can see the picture behind me, he's not even in the center of the stage.
Exactly. And I felt that's respective of the album.
Yeah.
Did you find that an issue? Did you not like that?
No. I found it unusual. I found it like, whoa, this seems like, in a certain way, it forced me to pay attention to the vocals.
As an instrument, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because you can't hear him breathing between the lines. It's not that loud. So you really have to pay attention if you want to hear the dynamics. And he's quite good at the use of dynamics as well, with vocals, which is not normally.
Well, do you know what? Let's add that to one of the aspects. Dynamics. throughout the whole album from every band member. They just know exactly when to bring it down. Let's look at the middle bass section of All Right Now.
Yeah.
Wow. Where it's just, the ready, and it just goes all the way down, and the bass. It's just the best word. One of my favourite words when I studied classical music was, I can't remember which composer it was, but I read the score, and the score. You know when it gives you instructions of how to play the note. One said play flirtatiously. It's like, as if you're flirting, and that was, I want to use that word wherever I can in terms of music. But this is it. All throughout the album, there are flirtatious moments where the band just really brings it down, and either if Paul Rodgers in the mix didn't have that above and beyond standoutness, then the band gave it to him when he needed it. How did they do that? They played softly.
Yeah.
It's just brilliant, man. It's absolutely brilliant.
And that's almost like, it's like you're having a conversation with someone. It's respectful to shut up and listen.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. They're respectfully playing with each other musically in a way that no one wants to shine more than anyone else in the band.
And no one deserves to shine either.
Yeah.
No one deserves to shine more than anyone else.
So it's almost like a rock band without an ego, but you never know. Yeah,
excellent. So the last part I want to talk about the music was the soulfulness. And you mentioned in the background, I didn't do any background research. I just listened to the album over and over. I must have listened to it 5 or 6 times. It's brilliant. So I'm glad you did the background research on this one. But to hear they did that, they were taking inspiration from the soul and Motown, no surprise to me whatsoever. And songs like Oh, I Wept really gives out, maybe it's his vocals, because his vocals are very soulful on their own, but the songs and the parts they're playing, half the time, Andy Fraser, I feel I'm going back and forth because we're going to talk about the individual members in a bit, but some of Andy Fraser's lines, you could have translated them to horns.
Yeah,
some of Paul Kossoff's guitar lines you'd expect here on an organ in like a Motown song.
Yeah,
but they've translated it stunningly, and the song "Oh I Wept" gave me massive soulful singer-songwriter vibes from the 70s. Jim Croce, I don't know how to say it. Jim Croce, Jackson Browne, James Taylor, those kind of singer-songwriter things. And
if you isolate the vocals and you think only about lyrics and melody, I think it's even more evident, isn't it?
Oh, for certain, yeah. And even like some of the I'm gonna put a Jim Croce song in the playlist for everyone. What were we saying? Yeah, the chord progression as well.
Yeah.
Some of the chord progressions were not very rocky.
Remember, it's got a really cool one, isn't it?
Bro, I've got it here. I've got it written as well. Yeah, brilliant. It's just got that. There's 2 or 3 times in the album you are cemented in a rock feeling, and then suddenly a new chord comes along, and you're like, "Hold on, like that's not rocky." Well, that's it. Yeah, the chord choices at 3 minutes 30 of Heavy Load. I just remember, again, you sat there for 3.5 minutes going, "This is good," and then suddenly this chord comes along, not rocky but impactful.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. They never get too heavy. It's never too much rock. In a way. I think that the interesting thing is the consistency of the style they're playing throughout the album. Because for me, like, they were sticking to a formula, but the problem with that is you can get repetitive and boring if you follow the same formula. So is it 7 songs, isn't it?
7.
So for 6 out of 7 songs, for me, that's that formula. But it gives the album consistency instead of making it boring, because they're good at what they're doing.
Yeah.
So, and then the 7th song for me is just not. It's almost like it's not part of the album, in my opinion.
We'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
Just sticking with the soul thing, the "Don't Say You Love Me," another beautiful soul-y song. I just felt the guitar tone and the general production made the song sound massive. And what I mean by that is, I don't want to blame it or blame. I don't want to give the credit entirely to the mix. It's also the playing. I've said the guitar tone, the dynamics at the end, fantastic. Brings so much power and triumph to a song that started off a little slow and soft. My last point is, I would argue that this song does as good of a job as sounding big as a soul band with a 6-piece horn section. I listen to Don't Say You Love Me, and I think you've done enough there to convince me this is a soulful song than a 13-piece band has done doing a soul song. It's brilliant, mate. It's brilliant.
Say that if it wasn't for All Right Now and for some of the instrumental parts, I would call it a soul album.
Would we call it soul fusion because it's soul done on rock instruments?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm inclined to agree with you, bro. And I also don't think we discussed groove.
Yeah.
How groovy is the album? But we did kind of touch on it because of the drum and the bass relationship.
Well, do you know what? Especially the first song, Fire and Water. Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the band.
Yeah,
a lot. Man. It's that groove, that halftime vibe, and it's a shuffle kind of vibe. So you carry that shuffle feeling that comes from blues and jazz.
Yeah.
But you have elements of funk in it, and it's
well, I was going to say it kind of reminded me of Grand Funk Railroad, which was a little bit of this, wasn't it? But amazing stuff, man. What else have I got about the songs? Just little things like that tiny drum solo at the end of the first song.
Oh, man.
How brilliant's that? Like,
that's so amazing, out there. It's like, give the drummer some at the end of the song.
Yeah, as it starts to fade out as well.
You know what I think? What if they've played for long enough and they thought they were just like starting to fade out, and the drummer went for it, and they decided to keep it. I like to think that's a good idea. What happened, But and it reminds me a lot of Ringo Starr's solo in the end. By the Beatles, because you have the bass drum playing a consistent rhythm and the toms phrasing on top of it, so it sounds a lot like the Beatles.
Excellent, and that song is in the playlist also. I mean, I don't really have any more to say about the songs. I suppose musically, rock was still finding its way. We have to remember, this transition from blues to rock had happened at the end of the 60s. The last episode we did was Cream and their debut album. 69, you got Zeppelin 1 and 2 coming out. Deep Purple are making tracks in the rock world. So I feel like rock was still finding its feet. And this feels like a fallout album coming from soul. So whilst the Zeppelin albums feel like a fallout of the blues, or Cream feels like a fallout of the psychedelic side and the blues. This is very much, sort of rooted in that soul. Long song lengths, but they don't feel long, do they?
No.
I feel like the musical sections are drawn out, but to such an extent that you're forever wondering, where's this going next? And you're not sat there going, okay, I'm bored now.
Now, the fade out actually makes me feel sad. I'm like, come on, guys, keep going, please.
Give me more.
So good.
I wanted more of that drum solo.
Who doesn't want a drum solo?
Oh, of course, bass players don't. Right, let's talk about the musicianship, because each member brought something absolutely incredible to this. I'll kick off with Andy Fraser being, me being the bass player. For the majority of the album, the bass is so heavy and thunderous, and it does its job as a bass player. Really just, as I've said before on this show, for me, perfect bass playing is taking the rhythm from the drums, marrying that with the harmony choices of the vocals. Once you've done that, you've got a perfect idea of bass playing. So technically, what he's doing doesn't fit into my mold of what a perfect bass player is, but there's no way I'm complaining, because what he does, I read someone say Free at this point were like a power trio on drugs, because they're a power trio but just with a singer, an added singer instead of the guitarist singing. And it sounds like this, and it's very interesting that we did Cream last week, because you've got this idea that sometimes when Paul Kossoff is holding a chord, you've got Andy Fraser taking the lead. It's brilliant. Each time, I could copy and paste this sentence for all of the musicians, but playing for the song each and every time. Some songs, I don't feel like you notice Andy Fraser's there, because he's doing such a brilliant job of holding down the groove, just keeping that root note in. It's just brilliant. I've already said about the dynamics. He plays such a big part in this sound. The aggressive end of Mr. Big, where he plays that really staccato phrase, compared with the soft and delicate middle section of All Right Now, is just a perfect spectrum of light and soft, hard and aggressive, but both contributing to the overall sound of the album.
I would say that for me, the star of the album is Andy Fraser. I think he is the man. He not only wrote most of the songs, I guess.
I'm just going to read a quote from what Felipe sent me yesterday. Felipe sent me yesterday. listening to the album for tomorrow's episode, I really want to know what sort of drugs Andy Fraser was into. Which is it's perfect. Like
I don't know if he was into anything, but it just sounds like he's into something that no one else in the world has ever tried.
Or no bass player, at least.
No bass player, yeah.
But yeah, just to finish off the bass playing,
Yeah.
you could hear this melodic redefinition of the bass influence people in later years. Geddy Lee, John Deacon, you know, innumerable bass players influenced from the fact that he started to actually add unusual parts to a song.
Yeah, exactly. And he was classically trained, so he had the music knowledge to go beyond what most rock musicians would do. Yeah. And as I mentioned before, he plays the piano in Heavy Load, and it's beautiful piano playing, very like soul, bluesy as well. And that you see the musicianship there when you hear the piano intro, and as I said, there's a space, the drum roll comes in, the whole band. The whole band comes together after the piano, after the drum roll. They're always waiting for the right moment to shine, let's put it like that. Yeah. And I think, Mr. Big's by far the most interesting song in the album, in my opinion.
It was my favorite, prog, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It was my favorite the first time I've listened to it. So I've listened to the album 3 times over the last week, and the first listen was I think this song was my favorite, and then I think Fire and Water became one of my favorite songs since we started the show. There's something about it. You know, interesting thing about that one. Joe Bonamassa covered that song in a live album, and he did pretty much like the original, so super cool. I didn't know about that until today. And but there's an interesting cover of it which I sent to you. Yeah, which we might talk about. Yeah,
I do. Yeah. Talk about it now. Go for it.
Yeah. So they were big fans of Wilson Pickett, right? And they wanted to write something that would be suitable for him, that would be his sort of music. So they wrote Fire and Water. And he covered it. So that means they weren't right about it.
Yeah.
His version of it is proper soul, proper American soul music.
Yeah.
You know, and it's worth listening to it. The Bonamassa version is really cool because it's really respectful to the original. Mm-hmm. I recommend people to listen to that one as well.
Excellent. Okay. Do you want to talk about Simon Kirk's job?
Well, I think I mentioned the drum roll. The other thing about him, apart from the grooves that reminded me of the band, this low, funky beat, which is, let's put it like this, it's really easy for drummers to impress by playing something fast. I think that can be said about loads of instruments, but if you go on Instagram today and you want to look at drummers, you're going to see the fastest drummer on earth and that kind of stuff, right? And everything he plays, apart from a couple of drum rolls, it's extremely slow. To keep the beat at a slow tempo and make it groovy is not an easy task.
Nope.
And the drum fills are really empty in a way. They remind me a lot of Nick Mason, Ringo Starr, and Phil Collins. Those guys, they would never play not never is a strong word, but they would avoid busy drum fills because that gets in the way of the vocals, depending on what kind of music you're playing. If you're playing prog rock or prog metal, heavy metal in general, you want a busy, loud drum fill, using the whole kit.
Yeah.
But when you hear his fills, there's a lot of space. And again, he is loud enough when necessary, but keeps the dynamics under control most of the time, which is impressive. Really good.
Perfect.
Really good job.
Well, I'll talk about Paul Kossoff then, and then you can talk about Paul Rodgers.
Yeah.
I thought Paul Kossoff's guitar tone was very standout. I actually have to say I'm not a fan of the guitar tone. I find it quite abrasive. Whenever the solo comes up, I'm just a bit like it's a bit shrill in places. Sometimes a note hits, and it's just the tone. It just kind of rubs me the wrong way. Having said that, it's iconic. And we know the solo in All Right Now is just the iconic, even from the tone, like just those little notes, those little motifs, it's iconic. His playing is very emotive in this album. And there's one, I think it's actually the penultimate song. What did we say it was? Don't Say You Love Me. It reminded me of Albatross by Fleetwood Mac. Just with such the soft playing, glen, glen, really emotive. Yeah. But at the same time, well, I suppose actually they go hand in hand. Restrained playing. So many solos he does in this album where you could imagine how Jimmy Page or Ritchie Blackmore would have played it. but it's nothing like that. It
No.
is soulful. It's about the vibe, the feel, the note choices, not playing things at 60 miles an hour, which is, I'm not accusing of Jimmy Page and Richie Blackmore of only being about speed, but we know they like to show off what they could do in a solo. Whereas, just as I said with Andy Fraser, and just as we've said with all four of them, it feels like Paul Kossoff is playing for the song and only for the song.
Yeah, and it's really hard to create an interesting guitar part without being a riff or a complicated solo, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, he plays, and also you can't. There's not too many overdubs in that sense. So a lot of guitar players would go down the route of mode layering guitars. So you have 5-6 tracks of guitar because that's how you fill the gaps.
Yeah,
I think he just decided to leave the gap there. So there's a gap, and so what?
Isn't it funny that, like, because we'd imagine, as we said, when I leave a gap for you to play, you take the gap and you fill it, and vice versa. I feel like we've found an album where everyone's leaving gaps and no one's filling them, but it's perfect.
Yeah,
it doesn't need to be filled, does it?
No, not at all. Stuff. And I think it's like, as I said, like if you have too many layers of guitars, maybe the bass and the drums they get buried in that wall of guitars. You don't want that.
Yeah,
no one wants that.
Do you want to talk about Paul Rodgers?
Yeah, I mean, a soul singer in a rock band. Can we say that? Is it fair to say that?
I think that's fair. Yeah, more than fair.
And it's not trying to. So it's impressive that he's not trying to sound like the iconic singers of that era. He could have been a copy of Robert Plant or Ian Gillan, or he's just doing his own thing, and he found his voice. I think if you listen to Bad Company, or if you listen to him with Queen as well, it's great, isn't it? So
is there a Bad Company song for listeners to check out?
Oh man, any of their songs, it's just like, I think when he was singing with Bad Company, he probably had a more established like style, right? Okay. So I'm not that familiar with their albums, like
I'll just put a track in so anyone can hear it.
But I'm saying, like, I've listened to their stuff. I remember playing some of that stuff when I was younger, and I was really impressed by the technical quality of his vocals, right? So it feels to me that, like, he established his style, and somehow with Free, he was literally free. He was like trying stuff out and singing some longer phrases, not necessarily try to impress. I think there's not a single moment in the album that his vocal technique is how can I put it,
virtuoso,
or the technique is noticeable. It's not about
it all feels normal.
He's technically flawless, but you don't perceive him as a technical singer.
I think that's perfectly put, man. I find his tone to be unbelievably soulful. When you hear him sing those soft songs, his voice is so soothing, which is what I think that's got to be a staple of soul singing, because soul is meant to bring goodness to the heart. But he has the power and delivery of a rock singer, of a theatricality about him, where he can deliver that long note and sort of shout a bit and make it sort of rather expressive and, like I said, theatrical. But it's all with that underlying soul voice as his bass.
Exactly.
Excellent. Cool. Well, shall we move on to the standout thing of this album, which is the final song of the album, called All Right Now. I'd like to start with the Laz Unleashed, which we haven't done in a while. I think you can guess.
I knew that would happen.
I think you can guess it. I think you can guess it.
You don't like the song.
Love the song. It's brilliant. However, it's the worst on the album.
Good point. I wouldn't disagree.
Do you agree? Yes. Laz and Felipe Unleashed. There you go.
I wish that song existed on its own, like a single.
Yeah, it doesn't
like
feel
an album
right, does
of
it?
one song.
Oh, bro, do you know, I thought I was going to come here and I thought I was going to have to defend myself in this position. No. I thought you loved it. It's a great song. Let's get that straight. For listeners, viewers, it is a fantastic song. One of rock's greatest songs, but it's the worst song on this album. It feels clunky. When every other song is grooving and soulful and spacious. Don't get me wrong, there's space on this song, but it just feels too straight. It feels too simple, too easy. What do you think? Do you agree?
Well, it became a hit because it was probably slightly more predictable than the other songs in the album. that song could please any audience, any rock fans anywhere in the world, and even people who don't like rock music. That it's so easy to get into that catchy chorus and the groove. And I love playing that song. I've played it a few times. I love listening to it, and it is a great song. It's again, it is probably one of the most iconic songs from the 70s. It's just, I wouldn't say, well, you said the worst song in the album. I would say just like it just doesn't belong to the album. It's just that for me. It's I think it's a surprise to have it at the end, and I actually liked listening to it in the context of the album somehow.
That's so you listen really to the album,
because it feels to me the album is a build-up for that song somehow, although it doesn't belong there. If that makes any sense.
I feel like it does make sense, but I feel like "Don't Say You Love Me" has this epic triumphantness about it at the end.
Yeah.
I'd have put "All Right Now" in between "Remember" and "Heavy Load."
I don't know if
just
that's
to take that break.
I don't know what the reason was, but that was actually the last song they wrote for the album. It wasn't meant to be there. It's more like they finished the album, still some space for a song. And so we've got this one. Yeah. Let's do it.
Well, it's a short album anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Probably needed another song.
Yeah.
And it's 5.5 minutes long. So they came up with that one. They recorded it, and the label said it's too long for the radio, and that's going to be. They probably agreed that should be the single because they're not interested in singles, but commercially you need one, and they probably understood that song was the best one for a single. But I highly recommend that you listen to the radio edit. It's in one of the reissues of the album, and the edit around 2 minutes. Man, if you have the time to check this, around 2 minutes they edit the song. It's so bad.
Bad. Okay.
The cut they made to connect, because they skip, I think, a whole verse and a little bit of the guitar solo.
Oh, I've heard it before.
The cut is just like, what did you do there? It's like it's almost like it skips a beat. It's really bad.
4 minutes. 2 minutes. Around single
2
version.
minutes. Yeah, but around 2 minutes of the song.
Oh, sorry, 2 minutes.
Okay,
sorry.
Yeah,
my bad.
2 minutes into the song, you can hear that cut, which is awful. But they knew they didn't like that. They were really pissed off with the fact they had to edit down. But they understood, and in the end, it worked for them. It was the song that made them a successful band. So,
well, it's iconic. It's a rock anthem that has lasted and stood the test of time for nearly 60 years. 50 years. It reached number 2 in the UK and number 4 in the US. So globally, it was a massive success. And I think the one, listen, I get it. I get why people would pick this song from this album to be the standout one. As I said, I just don't feel it fits that well. And for that reason, because it doesn't have that emotion to it. It doesn't have that character to it that the other songs do. And because of that, that's why I'm using the moniker of the worst song. It's still a fantastic song. And I get why people love it. The driving guitar riff, the bog standard soulful vocals, the sing-along chorus, that everyone knows how to sing that song. I mean, the lyrics are in the title, and then you're done. You've learned it, haven't you? But then, other than that, you've got the iconic solo, and you've got that bass line that comes in halfway that just really sort of breaks it up, gives it a bit of different, and re-injects some of that free characteristics to it. So it is a great song, but you can tell why it's been successful, right?
Yeah, you can. Man, I lost you for a few seconds and my connection was unstable.
That's good. I saw you freeze and I thought I'd carry on. I'd say a few more sentences.
I'd love to see this on YouTube when I'm not moving for a while. I can just do it right now and pretend.
I thought you were just enamored by what I was saying about All Right Now.
No, I missed it. I missed it all. That's it. Whatever you said, I agree fine. Anyway.
Yeah. Amazing. Basically, I was explaining why I think I was basically explaining that I understand why it was a success. Do you?
Yeah, I do. I mean, forget about the band, forget about the album. This song is great. It's a great song. If you listen to it, there's no way you're not going to sing the chorus. Second time around, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I know the lyrics now. It's just all right now. It's easy. I can sing along. So you can sing along. Also, it's not like a silly kind of love song. It's a bit like, I'm not gonna fall for your bullshit kind of lyrics. Like it's interesting. It's an interesting songwriting piece in terms of like lyrics and melody and groove, and it's all there. It's great. It's not, you can't point to flaw in that song. There's nothing.
True.
There's nothing about the song. It wasn't well done. It's just, again, as I said, doesn't sound like it's part of the album. On the other hand, I do feel like the album is a build up to that song somehow. Although the song wasn't written at the time they finished the other one, so who knows?
That's
who knows,
enough.
right?
Excellent. All right. Well, let's talk about the legacy of the album. I mean, just a few little points. You know, the song "All Right Now" set a template for rock anthems. You know, after that, people knew what you had to do: get a great opening guitar riff, make a sing-along chorus, stick a great guitar solo in there, and bang, you've done it. Yeah. The influence this song had on a bunch of different sort of music styles is quite. It's early. I wouldn't say this album is responsible for this genre being created or this one, but you can hear parts like the riff-driven style influencing hard rock bands, big sound with minimal instruments, inspiring bands like Bad Company, and even production-wise, I read something about someone saying it even inspired heavy metal a little bit. And first of all, I was like, I don't really see that. But in terms of production, there is a band called Machine Head, and they released an album called The Blackening. And The Blackening is one of my favourite albums of all time, and there's a reason for it. The reason is, all through the album, all you ever hear are the two guitarists, the bass player, the drummer, and the vocals. No overdubs. Oh, sorry, not overdubs. No multi-layering.
Yeah.
You get guitar one in your right ear, guitar two in your left ear, the bass and the drums in the middle, and the vocals. But that's it, man. There's no moment where there is more instruments than
they play live.
Yeah. And now I see that. I made that link earlier. I was like, right. Because All Right Now, Free have kind of done it with this album, and I see how that could really, at a time in the 60s where the Beatles were messing around with recording techniques and backwards taping and layering and multi-tracking and vocal harmonies, 8-part vocal harmonies, Free kind of just said, right, that's all brilliant, but we're going to take it back to its original thing, you know? Yeah,
exactly. Just like four blokes in the studio playing, making some music and enjoying
excellent.
Their own sound.
Yeah. Right, I've got some final thoughts, just a couple of sentences before your monologue. So I'll just say, the first thing I want to say is, I just imagine saying if someone asks me what do I think of this album, I want to say, right, imagine this. If All Right Now is the worst song, imagine how brilliant the rest of the album is.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole album has an air of easygoing and laid-back vibes throughout it. The music, the production, even the album cover is just so like, guys, let's chill out. Let's just take this how it goes. It reminded me of albums like these, how important it is to have a good cohesive band, because the songs technically are easy to play, but it's not at all easy to emulate the feel and the vibe that's going into the music. In a time where development and complexity was being injected into rock music, Free sought to bring it all back to its simple, raw foundations, and for this reason it stands out. Each musician brought so much to the table, but knowing where to hold back, where to let the music breathe, and where to give the space is what makes this album a standout album of 70s rock.
Yeah, and it's the album that put them in the same place as all the biggest names in the industry at the time.
Yeah.
So they've played that year, because of this album, they've played at the Isle of Wight Festival. It was the third time the festival happened, and they were sharing the bill with Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, and The Who. So
wow.
Yeah, so imagine playing a small club in London, and the next day you're playing with Hendrix, The Who, The Doors. So it's great, isn't it? It's
amazing.
Yeah, well,
would you like to finish us off with your monologue?
Yes. So
excellent.
Here we go. I'm getting used to this. Forgive my English. Here we go. Monologue by Felipe. See,
you even signed it off. There's only two people here, and we have very different accents. But you needed to sign it off.
In case you don't know,
loved it. Yeah,
that's
brilliant.
me.
Go for it.
Here we go. Soulful vocals, slow and funky grooves, incredibly creative bass lines, and just the right amount of guitar riffs. 4 young men from the UK have combined their efforts to put together a remarkable album that would eventually become a blessing and a curse in their lives. The unique songwriting partnership between Paul Rodgers and Andy Fraser gave birth to Fire and Water, the album that would put Free on the spotlight amongst all the rock gods of the 70s. But they were not trying to be like the others, and they were certain that there was a place for them in rock history. All Right Now became a massive hit and immediately took Free from small clubs to world tours. They were somehow capable of bringing the heart and soul of American music into the context of England's rock scene. The album never seems to pick up a fast pace or to get heavier than the first track. Paul Rodgers' voice makes us feel every emotion expressed in the lyrics, and the band makes us pay attention to every clever detail carefully played by each instrument. And then, out of the blue, just like magic, that classic riff comes through the speakers and starts a 5.5 minute journey that contains everything rock music is about. A rocking ending to an album full of soul. Free has made history with Fire and Water, and I wonder if they knew that it would never happen again.
Amazing. Very nice. My favourite part was what you said was when, about the part of these four British guys taking the heart of American soul music and injecting it into British rock.
Yeah.
Which is true and incredibly unique, because when we look at what American music did in the lead up to the 70s, it's obvious. You got blues, you got the blues in Cream, you've got stuff like that. To actually hear the American influence in rock bands from the 70s onwards was so much lower compared to how it would have been in the 50s and 60s. And this is, you're right, this is the moment, or one of the moments where it's like bridging the gap, isn't it? Between
because
the experimentation of the 60s and the establishment of rock in the 70s.
I think the British bands had already created a British blues genre.
Yeah.
There's British blues at that time.
Yeah.
So it's no longer an exclusively American style, but soul music
still American.
Wasn't like, it hasn't
been
turned into part of English culture in an original form as they did.
Excellent, man. Great point.
Yeah.
Cool. All done?
Yeah. Just one last thing. Shout out to my friend Rihanna, who recommended me the album. So thanks a lot.
There you go. Thank you, Rihanna. Excellent. Cool. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify or any of your podcasting platforms, scroll down, give us a review, hit the 5 stars, write a little sentence about us. It'll do us the world of good because it will take us up the algorithms and be seen by more people. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit like and subscribe so you stay up to date with all our new content. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for being with us one more time. Keep on rocking, everyone, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.
And as usual, guys, take care and long live rock and roll.